It's 1967, and Huey has got himself in a lot of trouble. On October 28, 1967, during a traffic stop, Huey had an altercation with Oakland police officer John Frey. It escalated into a gunfight which resulted in the death of Officer John Frey, which brought in the arrest of Huey P. Newton. Newton claimed that he was falsely accused of the crime, leading into the Free Huey campaign. The Free Huey campaign was a campaign where Black Panther members from all over came together and protested on Huey's arrest. The protest garnered massive international news attention and gave the Black Panthers more profile and popularity. This is about the final significant event for the Black Panthers in 1967, but it only gets more crazier in my opinion from 1968 to 1969. By 1968, the Black Panthers made a lot of significant accomplishments, but violence, killings, and deaths were a part of it as well. But first, let's talk about the accomplishments. First off, the party shortened its name from the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense to just the Black Panther Party. They began to expand across many different cities, like Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, New York City. Pretty much every major city across the country, the Black Panthers were involved, which gave them the party more size and a capacity of over 5,000 members. The party also began finding supporters from all areas, including the Peace and Freedom Party and the SNCC. Panthers' iconography, slogans, buttons, and t-shirts were widespread, and a lot of celebrities were with the cause. The party also set up chapters across the country, and when I say chapters, I'm basically meaning like it's like branches. It's kind of like, say like a Walmart, right? There's a Walmart in like wherever you live. There's a Walmart in Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, Washington DC. Like it's basically like they just set up their own base camps across the country, which gave them more size and capacity in terms of like, oh, there's a Black Panther organization here and there and there and there. Like you get what I'm saying? You feel me? Another event that gave the Black Panther Party a more worldly stage, or not even just a Black Panther Party, but just black rights or black civil rights, a worldly stage, was the 1968 Summer Olympics. During the medal ceremony, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who were two black medalists, gave the iconic Black Power salute with their fists held up high during the entirety of their American national anthem. The event was truly a momentous moment for black civil rights. It gave an uplifting level of courage for not just civil rights, but human rights on a global scale. Now that I talked about the big national achievements the party made, I now have to talk about the unnecessarily bad stuff that happened. As more and more members began to join the movement, a lot of younger recruits began to have different motives for what they intend to do in the party. Huge amount of college students joined the party because they were actually with the cause and they actually want to be progressive and be more humanitarian, socially, community, wanted to give back to the community, that type of way, like a Huey style. But there were also members who wanted to keep their street cred and wanted to uplift themselves and wanted to keep that street mentality provided by the guns that they got from joining the party. This brought in a lot of tension for the party members. This is where the very bad stuff happened. On April 6, 1968, 2 days after the assassination of MLK Jr., 17-year-old Bobby Hutton, who was the first ever recruit of the party, got into a confrontation with Oakland police officers because a lot of riots and protests were going on at the time after King's deaths. Eldridge Cleaver and other Black Panther members were by his side, but the situation escalated quickly, with the two opposing sides engaging in a 90-minute gun battle with the police. The gun battle ended with Cleaver being wounded and Hutton surrendering. Despite the fact that Hutton surrendered and stripped down to his literal underwear with his hands being raised in the air to prove he was unarmed, Oakland police shot 17-year-old Bobby Hutton more than 12 times, ultimately killing him. Time really does repeat itself, doesn't it? Hutton's death was a big tragic news for the Black Panther Party, being that he was such a very, very, very young kid. I also want to mention that COINTELPRO, that FBI program I talked about on my last video, you can watch it, link in description. You obviously know that the COINTELPRO FBI was still doing a lot of like messed up stuff towards the Black Panther Party, and to go deeper into that would take me literally an entire video. Comment down below if you want me to do a video on that. But yeah, that was still going on, so that was just like another layer of the that was going on. From April to mid-June of 1968, Cleaver was in jail until in September of that year he fled to Cuba, and then later oh my gosh, Algeria with his wife Kathleen. Now, in the beginning of the video, you remember me talking about how Huey got arrested after the killing of John Frey. Well, he was still arrested throughout 1968 until he was sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison in September of involuntary manslaughter. Shootouts, unlawful arrests, and killings were a huge part of this year, and for the next upcoming years as well. Now it's 1969, and surges of unnecessary violence and tension and murder began to weigh in on the Black Panthers, but not just from police enforcement, but from other groups. The conflict between a US organization and the Panthers in LA developed in shootings and beatings and the deaths of 4 Black Panther members. I just want to side note right here, I need to talk about the Panther 21 incident because I've never seen a story like this. And it's a story where a group of 21 Black Panther members were accused and arrested of not killing, but planting bombs on police stations in New York City in January 1969. Among the young defendants, there was a woman named Afeni Shakur who represented herself while pregnant and also possibly facing a sentence of 300 years in jail. The trial dragged on until eventually they were acquitted of their crimes in 1971 in May, and then a month later, she gave birth to Tupac Amaru Shakur, whose birth name was actually Lashane Parrish Crooks, but she changed it to Tupac Shakur because that just sounds much more cooler. Okay, so for right now, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna rush this, but I'm gonna rush it. Okay, I'm not trying to say that these events were insignificant. It's just that there was just so much stuff that was happening around the time that this will be a 40-minute video, and I don't want it to be that long. So this is just gonna be a little tidbits of just little bits of information that I thought was important, but I'm just too lazy to say. On December 4th, 1969 in Chicago, Illinois, Black Panther leader and revolutionary Fred Hampton was brutally murdered at his apartment, getting shot in the head at least 2 times while he was asleep with his 9-month pregnant wife right beside him. Fred Hampton's death was so horrible and scary and tragic for Black people in the country. His funeral had an attendance of over 5,000 Black people, and famous Black leaders like Jesse Jackson attended, and he even gave a eulogy in his memory. When Fred was shot in Chicago, Black people in particular, and decent people in general, bled everywhere. I don't want this video to be sad at this particular point. I mean, it is sad, but I left some good news, at least some good news that happened this year in 1969, so this is where I talk about that. If you know Huey Newton, you know that he was a big fan of Mao Zedong's book, The Little Red Book. And after reading the book, he came to the conclusion that the Panthers needed to serve the program and to make survival programs a priority. The most famous of the programs were the Free Breakfast for Children program, which initially started in Oakland but became very popular as the years went on. The program was mainly run by women volunteers from the party or non-related from the party, and they gave free breakfast from the beginning at 6 a.m. and serving meals from 7 to 8:30 a.m. The federal government failed, like it always does, to give kids a legitimate lunch program or just a program for the kids' needs. So when this happened, this new program by the Black Panther Party, it became an immediate hit. Many of the programs were in Black neighborhoods, obviously, but they didn't just serve to Black people, they served to all kids, no matter the ethnicity, race, it didn't matter. The party used the program to teach kids and families things like Black pride and anti-capitalism, and it was so well liked around the country that the Panthers set up kitchens to feed over 10,000 kids before they went to school. The Black Panther Party also launched liberation schools, which taught a majority of Black kids things that they wouldn't learn in a predominantly white school. And they taught these kids things like how to think instead of being taught what to think. And through all the killings and turmoils and just assassinations and things that I discussed earlier, it's great to see that the Black Panther Party throughout all of that was still making progressive moves and better decisions to help uplift black people and put them in better positions. Not much insane crazy things happened this year in 1970 as far as research goes for me, but remember Huey? Well, his conviction got overturned on May 1970, but he still remained incarcerated until he was finally released on August 5th, 1970. So he was free. Actually, I lied. There was a couple things, like a couple members traveled internationally to countries like North Korea and China and engaged in conversation with its leaders to try to have talks about ending American imperialism. Eldridge Cleaver, he visited... Hold on.
Pyongyang.
Damn, I thought that shit was gonna be like much harder to pronunciate. But yeah, he visited that city in North Korea, and when he went back to the States, he talked about how cool its North Korean leader was and how cool his writing was, but I don't think many people paid attention. These moves were notable because it gave the Panthers more international ties instead of just being national. They were now internationally tied with people around the world. The Black Panther Party gained massive, overwhelming success throughout its couple years, but the cracks from within began to crumble. That didn't sound right. The cracks began to crumble from within. That's what I was trying to say. Some Panther leaders like Huey and David Hillard had a different approach for leadership and where to take the Black Panther movement forward. Huey wanted a more social community service / self-defense type of approach and helping kind of like a humanitarian, just helping like social reform, helping just communities get together and just like a togetherness, while other people like Eldridge Cleaver wanted a more revolutionary approach. He thought that the Black Panther Party became more reformist instead of being revolutionary. In its early days, it was more revolutionary, but now it's became more reformist. Disagreements emerged, which then led to a split, which then led to violent assassinations within the party. On top of that layer of bad news? What is going on? On top of that layer of bad news, from mid to late 1971, hundreds of Black Panther members began to leave the party. And as a result of this, Huey left Oakland and then fled to China for a couple of days to think about how to move the party forward and to think about delegations.